The other day we discussed the notion of transmission. And it seemed to be necessary to discuss further before we get into actual experience of Vajrayana, that the attitude of a transmission is a meeting of the two minds as a basic point. Then we have the experience of a transmission which takes place in a certain ceremonial form. The form particularly was suited to your particular basic being, basic psychological state, and particular tantric jnanas that you are suited to at that particular level. So the question here is that I would like to discuss more details about the form tonight. And the attitude of a meeting of the two minds, it seemed to be absolutely necessary. Without that, there's no way out or no way in to understand the principles of Vajrayana, having already trained in the basic Buddhist work, practices basically, and everything. So there's a need for respecting the form, a need for respecting one's own attitude. That person or student is willing to commit himself or herself into a basic fundamental trust that exists. Or, for that matter, we could say, even the potentiality of the trust that exists within the working basis of student-to-teacher relationships. That when the potentiality of trust is already experienced, established, there is a need for guidance. Let us discuss this particular trust once more. I would like to make sure that you have understood properly. When we talk about this tantric type of trust, we are talking in the terms of actual experience of trust in oneself and actual sense of compassion, attitude to oneself. That you are no longer playing the game of idiot compassion to yourself or to others. That you are completely freed from spiritual materialism. That there is a sense of complete 100% fresh air. That things are clear, there's enough circulation, there's enough understanding, enough freshness is taking place in one's system, that it feels okay, experiencing okay, and practically everything's okay. That there's nothing to worry about, nothing to be concerned about, little problems. Although that does not necessarily mean that problems have been solved, everything's going to be milk and honey and sugar level at all. And there is actually still sense of struggle. But such struggle has become a very healthy struggle. It is a learning process, it's a working process that struggles are the fuel, in fact, into the bright burning flames of your energy. having that kind of attitude, then we begin to involve into furthering entering into tantric samaya, tantric discipline, a samaya of receiving Abhisheka. That the working relationships with the student and teacher has been already established. There's mutual trust, mutual understanding, mutual openness. It takes place constantly. Openness to the traditions that exist, the lineage, to yourself, to your colleagues, and to your what's known as a root guru, the performance of Abhisheka itself, the person who is actually initiating you, giving you the Abhisheka. There are different types of approaches that's been made. Having that basic background preparation is very solid enough. Then there is different categories of that such Abhisheka could take place. And there's Abhisheka of the outwardness, outward Abhisheka. In a positive sense, we could say the superficial Abhisheka. Abhisheka of form, outward Abhisheka, which literally means that it is necessary that a person should undergo through training of taking part in such a magical circle. Unless a person doesn't do that, person is not initiated, not receiving Abhisheka properly. There's time, usually traditionally, certain date is being set within advanced level of traditionally in medieval times in India and Tibet. 6 months warning, 6 months preparation is taking place. And since the tantric traditions become extremely available recently, such as like in Tibet, that some of the teachers have taken off that particular rule, which seems to be a big mistake at this point anyway. That if a person doesn't have enough time to preparing herself or himself into the situation, that there's no messages coming across, there's no experience happening, so that suspendedness, that you are just about to receive Abhisheka, but you are at the same time suspended in a 6 months level, is extremely important. That you have no idea what you're going to do, you have no idea what you're going to experience, although the texts on the Abhisheka experience be presented to you. In the meanwhile, that 6 months is a study course, that how to handle yourself, how to relate with experience of Abhisheka has been described, explained in minute detail. And amount of people that you're going to receive such a Abhisheka is also part of the important point, that level of chemistry of individuals, that such individual of certain type of people, maybe there should be 20 of them, 25 of them, maybe there should be only 3 of them or 6 of them, are the discretions of the master, Vajra master, who choose and understand the experience, development of a particular student. So whole process of receiving initiations, Abhisheka, is extremely special and a heart of the matter of the whole thing. There's a psychology that happens between the people, and also the environment that such people created at the time are extremely important. So this is not the same as collecting tokens, like collecting stamps, or simply collecting signatures. of famous people in your dowry. So one of the problems that we have developed due to the corruption that took place in recent years of the presentation of Vajrayana in this world, that we regard that receiving hundreds and hundreds, dozens and dozens of Abhisheka, collecting them constantly, is regarded as confirming blessings after blessings after blessings, has become kind of fad, popular thing to do, or something like that, which created enormous misunderstanding. That in such case, that people who collect successive Abhishekas, take part in the Abhisheka ceremony, is regarded as just purely needing further identification, further reference point, further security is needed. That has become one of the big problems. And since the great teacher was known as the great Jamgo Kongtrul, and he was born and lived in the 18th century, early 18th century, and raised as educated, enlightened student of Vajrayana. And he has been doing the same thing, collecting Abhishekas, but in his case it's entirely different, because he felt, experienced, he understood, and after his training is over, he receives all the teachings from personally 135 teachers that he received, he studied under, that he drew up reformation of Tibetan Buddhism. And he called it his Rimi school, which literally means ecumenical tradition of bringing contemplative traditions with Tibetan Buddhism together, making it into a powerful practicing lineage, which ourselves belong to this particular lineage, ourselves, as well as my predecessor, the 10th Trungpa, also belongs to this particular lineage. And that Rime school has made enormous impressions and enormous sarcastic jealousness within the Tibetan tradition, and making big deal out of nothingness. Why can't we just go on and just buy Abhishekas? And why can't we just go on as we were? And what's wrong with what we're doing? But Jamgo Kongtrul has seen something's wrong with the tradition and practice, that it has become receiving Abhisheka successfully is purely belongs to the collector's item. And there's a problem with that, is actually being pointed out by the great Jamgo Kongtrul by saying that if you have no understanding of the practicing lineage, that there's no point in collecting successive pile of shit. One pile of shit might be good, one pile of shit might be ripe, smelly, fantastic, and dry, but still you're collecting a pile of shit, and you become a shit specialist. True, if you're a manure expert, you can utilize them, but these people who are collecting such pile of shit are trying to make them into food, which is beyond question. And the point here is that I would like you to understand and realize that there was that spiritual materialism happening in Tibet in the late 18th century, or the early 18th century onward, that Tibet had lost its communications and receiving great teachers from outside of Tibet. And finally, Tibet had become just a little plateau, little island that had to survive by itself, and consequently, it became too much inbreed. That there was a lot of spiritual materials that begin to happen. And abbots and great teachers are more concerned by building solid gold roof above their temple and building gigantic Buddha images and making their temple beautiful and impressive, rather than they're interested in actually practicing lineage. They sat less, they did the business more. And that had to become the problem. There was the turning point of Buddhism in Tibet began to lose its grips with Dharma. And it began to become slowly and very irritatingly and horrifically turning into ugly spiritual materialism. And that was the problem. And that is the seed of that problem has happened actually at that point. And that is why the greater Jamgo Kongtrul is like the jewel Mr. Pailu shit. That he began to shine his wisdom that it is necessary to call upon the 8 great traditions of the Tibetan Buddhism, which includes the Gelugpa tradition, Sakya tradition, and the Kagyu tradition, and the Nyingma tradition of the 4 sects of the Tibetan Buddhist schools of Tibet, and to bring them together. So let us unite ourselves, let us work together with this contemplative tradition. Let us work together, let us feel this way. Let us experience that how is like, instead of inviting hundreds of artists to build a glorious shrine, let us experience how it is to feel, to sit on your meditation cushion and do nothing. And that notion has been long forgotten at that time, has been reintroduced. That seemed to be the basic point of contemplative tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. Once again, began to become a Reformation era that took place in Tibet. In some sense, we could put together that such contemplative tradition exists in Tibet or created by Jamgo Kongtrul. And Jamgo Kongtrul the Great resembles George Fox. But at the same time, that the process that it developed is not quite the same as what George Fox did, because the country is less organized and there's less selective and special place to worship that any Buddhist of Tibetans can go and worship, any meditation halls they can go on, and so forth. There is a somewhat slight difference between George Fox's approach and Jamgo Kongtrul's approach. But nevertheless, brings it in the same situation. And another thing is they didn't quake. And there was no big deal about sitting. They just sat, which might be the difference from George Fox and Jamgo Kongtrul. the story of George Fox, who ran through the village of Litchfield, and by shouting the bloody cities of Litchfield, and he was a spiritual ecstasy. He saw actually blood gushing through the street corners. And his friend farmer found his foot is completely frozen and received him and gave him a hot bath. And Jamgo Kongto didn't experience such problems. But still, I think fundamentally it's some kind of spirit as the Quaker tradition, of which is could be said as contemplative tradition in some sense. Not particularly including our president. The question of contemplative tradition at this point is actualizing that work and experience bringing together, which is the practice of the lineage of the contemplative traditions. And there's a work of Jamgu Kongtu which calls Dangwak Nzu, which literally means the treasury of oral instructions, that he compiled, edited the books, sacred teachings of the practicing lineage of a Buddhist Tibet. In this book, he described that how a person could experience. There's a commentary by him at the beginning, at the early stage of the book, in the volume 1 and 2, in which he talks about the possibilities how tantric student should handle themselves, not purely based on the ritualistic and ceremonial aspect should turn them on, as because being awe-inspired, and partly because they have no idea how to handle the ceremony. And so consequently, students get bewildered, and students feel overwhelmed because they have no idea how to handle in the ceremony, how to behave in such a way. And a mixture of that inadequacy, at the same time, mixture of all environment that has been created. And Jamgu Kongtrul says in his writing that was not the experience of meeting of the two minds. There was a purely fear of inadequacy and bewilderment. That you can't take advantage of a student because they don't know how to handle in the ceremony, how to behave themselves, how their state of mind should handle. They feel freaked out, and that is no longer the handle or the stepping stone anymore. But students should be treated very gently and freely, kindly, that they have some understanding of the steps of the process they're going to take, that process of the ceremony as such and such, such and such and such. This level, that level, this level, that level, and now you're going to relate with this. Since you related with that, now we're going to get to the next level. A student should be guided as the mother raises her infant into the feeding by nipples at the beginning, and then begin to feed with milk, begin to feed with external milk from cow, and then begin to feed with soup, liquid broth. Then finally begin to put little drops of solid food into that soup, and the child begin to experience there's food is solid thing. So finally, when the infant is raised into a proper childhood, that the infant knows how to drink liquid, how to drink soup, and how to chew meat, and how to swallow it, and how to eat dough, how to shape them into forms and put them in your mouth. At the same time, you drink soup or vegetables at the same time. So the bringing tantric students into a practice of Abhisheka is precisely the same process that student, as in the beginning, is not capable of doing anything but just experiencing oneness, which is like just learn to drink foreign milk from a cow, opposed to your own mother. And then students begin to realize that openness brings some kind of experience to relating with this and that world, your emotions, and fascinations about the ceremony, fascination about tantric traditions in general. And then finally students begin to have some sense of grasping to the teachings, that teachings make sense and it means something to you personally, experientially, and actually now on this point towards that you can relate with the principles of 5 Buddha families that you can work on. In this point, we have what's known as the 5 types of Abhisheka experiences. That's the basic tradition of Anuttara Yoga is presented, is that at the beginning, what's known as the Abhisheka of the jar, of the vase, which is actually symbolically taking a shower, taken from the Indian custom tradition, is when you want to take a shower, you go out into the river with a pot jar and you scoop up a jar full of water, you pour it over you. That's where to take a shower in the medieval times. That is the first process, is a sense of purifying yourself, cleaning out the sharp corners of your body, that your ears clean, your armpits are clean, that any hidden corners that exist in your basic makeup had to be cleaned out. In this case, obviously, the whole thing is a purely psychological one. That you have the psychological smelly armpit, that which generates lots and lots of odor to your neighbors and yourself. You begin to hate yourself. Your neighbors begin to hate you. It's a cleaning out process in the psychic level. That seems to be the first starting point of Abhisheka, is a cleaning process. And actually the word Abhisheka is named after that headline of the first Abhisheka. Anointment, christening, cleaning out completely, which actually goes with the Christian tradition as well, of christening and using water as a way of cleaning yourself. It's like wash your hand before you eat. And particularly if you're dealing with the cows and donkeys, or if you've been to the bathroom right before you eat, you should wash your hand properly. so that you could eat and taste your good meal that's been cooked. It's a basic sensible norm that one should taste one's food better than one's shit that you experience with your hand. Very sensible and a basic approach. And having cleaned it out already, basically fundamentally purified, then what you do is you put on your clean clothes. And Abhisheka process basically here, sorry to sidetrack, but Abhisheka process here is that every participant's Abhisheka, or the students here, are regarded as that princess and prince who are coming into court, just about to sit on the throne and relate with the subject, which is your subconscious concept, your mind, samsaric world you have. As far as you are concerned, you are a little prince, little princess of yourself at the same time. So the idea is the royal treatment, which is an equal term, equal word, Abhisheka. We could say another word, Tibetan word for Abhisheka is a wang, which simply means giving power to you, is empowerment. That you be empowered as the royal ruler, the majestic one. So, king, before he gives audience to the public, he bathes and he put his clothes on, and finally he put his crown on, which is the second Abhisheka, which is the coronation Abhisheka. Is that certain crown is being created, which has the 5 pieces around your head, inlaid with the jewels, and then you have the basic stand for that particular piece. It's like the traditional Western crown has 4 pieces of sprung that goes into the central point. In the case of the Indian tradition, there are 5 sprungs that goes up. Each particular curve of this particular shape representing different types of Buddha families: Vajra, Ratna, Padma, Karma, Buddha. That you finally are coronated, you be made into a tantric master, practitioner at least, of confident person. That is connected with what's known as the Ratna family situation, which is enrichment and a sense of plentifulness, sense of no threat, sense of openness, sense of generosity, and so forth. And then next one is having coronated already, that your hands are still hanging out in your lap, on your knees, sat on the throne, and you have nothing to hold on to. That a person could feel quite selfish, self-consciousness, that this big crown is sitting on your head, and you have dressed up in a robe, and your hands are loose. And you can pick your nose, or you can scratch your chin, but still it feels awkward at the same time. So the idea is that give you a toy, a royal toy of this little prince or princess. The first toy should be given to the right hand, which is a Vajra scepter that we have here, this shape, particularly this form, which is representing immense power. That the 7 qualities of Vajra, which is it cannot be cut, cannot be disintegrated, and it cannot be abstracted, and it is penetrating, it is fearless, it is open, it is utterly destructive. So when somebody throws his scepter of Vajra, his magical bomb, that throws and then comes back to your hand, that you don't have to have a manufacture of Vajra for the king of the ruler of the universe, like as we manufacture our bombs. But each time when you throw, it goes and fulfills purpose and it comes back in your hand. And that seemed to be the basic point of toy for this young king who was so ambitious, so youthful, and still not knowing exactly how to handle his subject. And then next Abhisheka that existed, by the way, this Vajra is also related with that of the Padma family, which is a sense of being beautiful lover, that you have been finally acknowledged, and actually you've been told that you can make a love without destroying somebody else, that you can create by making love. That holding that Vajra is not only having a choice, but it is a sense of compassion at the same time, sense of warmth, sense of hospitality, sense of generosity is taking place at that point. And then the next one is that not only a person gets scepter, but a person, this royal personage, gets a musical instrument, bell, goes with the Vajra at the same time. That musical instrument is that you are not only concerned about your own compassion and your own cleanliness, your own crown, but you have something to say rather than playing with yourself, having lots of toy, but still being dumb. You have something to proclaim. That's the bell, which is known as the Karma family symbol, which is the utterance of sound. That sound cannot be abstracted and it could be heard by anybody wherever you are. If you're around a corner, you could hear it. If you're distant, you can hear it. If you're close, you can hear it. You can't hide yourself underneath your chair, pretend you didn't hear any sound. The karma sound of this bell is unobstructed, unobstructive. That could be heard, could be understood completely, thoroughly. It pierces your eyes. And the sounds of bell is very high pitch that invokes wakeful, that you can't fall asleep anymore because sound of this bell is too penetrating to your ears. Then the fifth one of the symbol of Abhisheka is again bell combined with Vajra scepter together. They're fastened together by silk ribbon. And now king has the clean body and beautiful clothes with a crown and a scepter to hold, exercise his power, and he has way of proclaiming himself with a bell. And what's lacking there? He doesn't have a name. Which king is this? Who are you? That's become a problem. That if you don't know who you are, you have nothing to say. You try to say something, but if you have no idea what's your name, what's your status, What's your degree? Are you literate or illiterate? Are you actually a human being? Tell us who you are. The first thing you usually say to people is that, how do you do? Which is like ringing the bell. And then you introduce, my name is Jack Parson, Tom Smith, whatever. You introduce yourself to the world. So that is the name Abhisheka, what's known as Ming Wang, which literally means name Abhisheka. That bell is rung by your Vajra master above your head, and at the same time, when the bell is rung, you've been named in a tantric name, which is known as traditional secret name, that you are not particularly publicized as your ordinary name, but when you need your power to impose or to wake somebody up, then you say your Vajra name, your tantric name. There is enormous psychological progress, psychological change when such person takes Abhishek at that point. That person has gone through a whole cycle of being accepted, acknowledged, and you finally have your scepter, you can proclaim, and now you know your name at the same time. In a sense, we could say such ceremony is the same kind of philosophical, metaphysical, spiritual connection as that having bar mitzvah, but something much more slower, much more literal, and more powerful, more than just a girlhood or boyhood, that you actually are a ruler of some kind. That's happening. And that seems to be the basic point of Abhisheka is not so much to zap you with a magical power, but bringing you up slowly, gently, so that you can walk with yourself. You can experience yourself. You can actually relate with yourself. Simply because you existed, you have a body, therefore you can bathe yourself. Having bathed already, then you put clothes on. Having clothes already, then you put your crown and hat or whatever you like to call it. And then you have something to hold on in your hand. Then you have something to make a statement of why you're doing all this. And after this, above this, you have a name. You've been called so and so and so. Thy name. That seems to be one of the basic points in the process of graduating from the ordinary world into the world of continuity, of Tantra world, that you finally become a real person from that point of view. That seems to be the basic meaning of Abhisheka. Some point I would like to introduce also the principle of 5 Buddha families, which has been so far up in the air that people have read reports and books, maybe literatures of it, but still we haven't got the nitty-gritty of that. Maybe we could do that next time. At this point, I would like to concentrate on this question of Abhisheka, graduation, enlightenment, listening, whatever you like to call it, which seem to play extremely important part in tantric ceremony, tantric literature, tantric tradition. And that's one of the points that Tantra is so rich. It actually relates with the human experience of a physical situation, rather than lofty ideas of purely struggling from the Hinayana level of trying to get your awareness together. In the Mahayana level, just trying to be kind to your neighbor. And somehow this transcends those hassles. It automatically becomes the greatest ideas of all. And sometimes I wonder actually who thought this idea. And it amazes myself constantly all the time. And it happens to exist. Somebody actually thought this idea, actually transmitted to people, and actually did work. It's somewhat very amazing. I suppose that's we could call it magic. If you like to have any questions, you would like. I would like to ask you again and again that your questions hopefully have some relevance to what we're discussing rather than some other sidetracking topics. Jackal eyes.
Correspondence between the level of Abhisheka and the 10 bhumis being at some point in the 10 bhumis?
I think there is some point, but according to Kalachakra Tantra's point of view, the 10 bhumis are included in that, and it doesn't follow through the several same logistics as being 10 bhumis have been presented. That, for instance, the Vajra Abhisheka of the bathing is related with the prajna, and that of the coronation is related with the first bhumi, generosity, and so there's jumping back and forth. But I think it's related with some experience. That becomes very technical. We have to discuss the details of it, which would require another entire course.
Yes.
What?
Thanks.
You said that you finally become a real person. Could you talk about how properly to experience your feelings when you're a real person?
That you be acknowledged as a person, which has been the problem all along. That a lot of the religious traditions, spiritual traditions, make a point of condemning you, how wicked you're being, how terrible you are, you pull yourself together. If you do so, we have a candy for you, some kind of promise. That has to be an entirely different approach. And in Tantric tradition is that to build yourself up, that you don't have to relate with the whole process is the donkey and the carrot level anymore. That the donkey has the carrot already, so the donkey should feel good. Gentlemen, ready shirt.
From your description of the 5 Abhishekas, it sounds like there's still a sense of individuality or ego. Is that the case?
I think that's a very interesting question that you asked. I'm glad that you raised that point. Is that the Tantric way of approaching psychologically is you coronate ego, you bathe ego, you give ego a scepter. So finally, when the ego finds itself as what it wants, and it begins to flop, and it begins to be so embarrassed, so non-existent. So then you begin to raise your new kingdom of egolessness taking place. That seems to be one of the basic points. That's very, very important, actually. Young lady over there, green.
I'd like to know how
all of this relates to Buddha as an example.
What do you mean by that?
Well, as a Buddhist, one recognizes Buddha's way as an example. I don't see how this relates to what he went through.
Well, I mean, that is Buddha, actually. The Buddha, if you see it in a different level, he dressed up as a king. He has crowns, he has scepters in his hand, and he has royal gaze. He behaves like a king. And that seems to be the whole point of a Buddha of a different approach, not from the traditional Hinayana or Mahayana, but the Vajrayana type of Buddha, which are called Sambhogakaya Buddhas. That they do behave that way. It's very personal.
Relate to the historical Sakyamuni Buddha.
Yes, it's supposed that when Shakyamuni Buddha was invited by King Indrabhuti, and he said, I would like to listen to Tantra, none of your old other things, of the Hinayana or the Mahayana. And I would like to relate it with my sense perceptions, sense emotions, and I would like to receive something to work with it. And Buddha says, oh, you want to hear Tantra? And the king said, yes. And then Buddha said, if that's the case, let me excuse my Arahat and Hinayana and Mahayana disciples out of this realm. And they be excused, they be asked to walk out. And then Buddha opened what's called, surprisingly enough, a Vajradhatu mandala that the Buddha introduced. And he opened the Vajradhatu mandala. Buddha became the Vajradhatu mandala himself, Vajradhara, and he taught his teachings of Tantra, which is the first opening of Tantra, actually took place. And for the first time, he manifested himself instead of dressed in a monk's robe, he dressed himself in the royal costumes. And he taught the first Tantra, Guhya Samaj, and Vajradhatu of the Kriya Yoga Tantra. He began to teach.
Wait a minute, I have one more question also. Well, how about when Buddha learned to see things as they are? He didn't, did he receive Abhisheka from anybody? Or didn't, I thought he just like discarded all that and went off by himself and decided to sit down and realize something. It didn't seem like he had a spiritual friend or anything. It seemed like he finally...
Well, his life is rather depressing.
His life is rather depressing?
That he had done the whole thing single-handed. And I mean, that's why that there's thing to be appreciated what he did, what he had done, in spite of all the problems that he doesn't have a Sangha or community or anybody like that. In fact, we go so fast to say he didn't really become a Buddhist.
Well,
Well, then by his example, wouldn't you say that
it's not necessary to have a spiritual friend necessarily?
Absolutely necessary at this point, because that particular approach has been already handled by generation to generation. And if you like to be a second Buddha, that's maybe deceptive.
Well, it's not a matter of wanting to be a second Buddha. It's just a matter of going a certain way or
Good
something.
luck, madam.
Thank you.
Shiny-headed guy.
I have two questions. First, I would like to know how much domain, how much control over the kingdom of subconscious gossip can one develop from the practice of sitting without an interaction with a Vajra master?
No telling.
Secondly,
Please.
I would like to know about the Vajra Master. Does the Vajra Master still sit? Still, leave it that way, still sit. And does the mind of the Vajra Master ever generate, ever produce a thought like, I must sit more?
Well, that seemed to be an interesting question, actually. Vajra must sit. Actually, if I may be so corny as to say, Vajra must sit when he sits. That's the old joke. But Vajra Master doesn't particularly feel self-conscious, so there's no question about how he should handle himself. When he feels, he feels. When he sits, he sits. When he eats, he eats. That's actually Yogacara philosophy of a Zen phrase, but somehow this fits with what you're asking in your question. Vajra Master is regarded as the conqueror of the universe, and he has the universe in his palm. He had a captive audience, captive fly. If you want to squash, it happens, but he usually doesn't. Young lady? Yeah.
Tonight we seem to be talking about a great sense of gentleness with the student, with gently taking the student through these stages and building him up to a real being. Whereas earlier we seemed to be talking about panic and destruction and a much more frightening, threatening type of experience, and I wonder how those relate.
Well, I think the situation is, as we are going through the landscape of tantric tradition that we are discussing, that I was very careful to not introduce the juicy bits at the first. But I was being very faithful and orthodox and presenting the whole scale that I was presented myself, in the same way that you need panic, you need that kind of sense of nervousness, sense of uncertainty, which is necessary. And then, having gone through such a period already, then you arrive at this point that you are capable of receiving Abhisheka, which are much more at home, that you are complimented by your teacher and your world. And I used to experience myself in a very simple, nothing particular tantric about this, is my educational system that I have experienced myself when I was in my country, that I was constantly criticized. If I lean back like this, I've been criticized that I should sit up. And I should make pleasant conversations with the dignitaries that he comes around, and I should be hospitable to them. Each time when I did something right, which I thought I was doing right, I've been constantly criticized more heavier. I've been cut down constantly, utterly by my tutor, attendant tutor, who sleeps next door in the corridor, which I can't get out, I can't even walk out. And he's always there, and he's watching me, he's serving me and watching me at the same time. And that was a very claustrophobic and somewhat painful experience, that he'd be constantly cut down. And then my other teachers, other tutors who teach me philosophy, metaphysics and so forth, also would work through him, so that the other teachers doesn't have to put embarrassing pressure on me, so they could pressure my tutor, so that my tutor could pressure me at the same time, which I thought was very clever, but still it's not so good. There's no change. Everything coming down on the same level, constant happening. And I stuck with that because I didn't have any reference point as to the idea of freedom and being loose anywhere at all. I was brought up that level in my infancy since age of 18 months. I was brought up that level, so I have no reference point and no idea of being an ordinary kid who was just playing with his dirt and toys or chewing rustic metal or whatever you have. I have never experienced such a reference point. So since I didn't have any reference point, I thought that is the world already. I felt somewhat at home, but at the same time extraordinarily hassled and claustrophobic, and didn't feel so good constantly. But at the same time, little breaks like going to the bathroom and eating your meal is enormous relief. But at the same time, that except when you go to the bathroom, which is a free area, which usually feels enormous fresh air, because the bathroom is built in such a way that there's the long drop method, that there's a big hole cut out in the floor, that air is coming at the bottom, and you feel that fresh air coming up. At the same time, you feel that nobody's watching you how to shit properly. And apart from that, even when I eat, I've been watched about how to eat properly, how to handle myself, how to extend your arm, how to watch a cup, and how to bring it towards your mouth, and how to eat properly, how to handle things even if I made a big noise of swallowing. And that's been regarded as, it's been told that that's a crocodile style. And any Rinpoche, any important tulkus or abbots wouldn't swallow in crocodile style. And everything is being very personal from that point of view, say the least. And then I felt very interestingly, as I evolved myself without a struggle to the authorities, so to speak, and I just went on. And finally, the whole world that I had around me, which I used to, and finally the whole thing began to become my reference point at that level, not any more hassle. Although the world is full of hassle at that point. But my tutor seemed to be afraid of me. He began to say less. And my teachers began to teach me less because I've been asking them too much questions. I was already interested in what they had to say. I've been pursuing them for more and more. And now they begin to have a more relaxed situation than even I would like to have. And my tutor needs more. He's more frightened that he didn't know exactly how to handle me. And he's afraid of me instead. I thought maybe there's some kind of big joke cooking. And they begin to try to tell me that they will leave me like that for 10 days, and then they're going to catch me again. And 10 days goes, month goes, week goes, and in fact it took 6 months, and on and on and on. Nothing happened. And there is some kind of interesting experience that actually you're working. Finally, you begin to click yourself from the experience of a discipline. The discipline becomes a part of your system already. And my tutors of the philosopher teachers or the metaphysical teachers are already being hassled by me instead. That I want to know more and more about what's happening. And they begin to have run out of their answers. And they be hassled by me. And my tutors, on the other hand, my attendant tutors, be hustled because I was so much wholehearted, and he became afraid that he can't keep up with me anymore. And so there's a paranoia between the two areas. And I think that's kind of point, some kind of point, reference point we might talk about at this point, is there is that kind of thing I realized later on when I'm reflecting back, even today, and I was thinking about that last night, this morning. I discussed that with my friend this morning as well, that there is some kind of interest that involved, that once you are in it already, being part of the whole thing, that you become part of the experience of the teachings, that you are no longer being hustled. You are no longer a separate entity from the teachings. You are embodiment of the whole thing. That's simply the basic point.
Some initiations, are there not more than 5 different divisions? In some of the tantric initiations, the Abhishekas, are there not sometimes 7 or 8 as well?
Well, there's outer initiation, which we discussed tonight. Then there's inner initiation. Then there's secret initiation, which all of them are broken into different particles.
Yeah, I was in Bodh Gaya in January, and it was Kala Chakra initiation.
Yeah, Kala Chakra initiation takes about 3 days.
Yeah, and there was also one called the ornament, and another one called the what did the ornament? Conduct. That you didn't mention.
Conman?
Conduct. It's to do with costume.
Well, I think in the Kala Chakra Abhisheka I had was that at the beginning there's a preparation, testing. Then the second day you actually experience the first Abhisheka, the outer one. Then the second day inner one, third day the secret one. Then there is the further ones that are connected with the introducing how you relate with your student if you are a teacher. It takes place.
Yeah, but they talk about the first one as entering as a baby, and first there's the water, the head crown, and then there's an ornament. I just wondered if that was peculiar to that particular initiation, or whether that's just another thing.
Well, we should do it again. We have an opportunity.
Oh, yeah. I didn't take it. I was just audience.
You didn't? Well, maybe you should prepare yourself more.
Oh, for sure.
And study more and go back and take it. Thank you. Young lady in white.
Rinpoche, you talk about trust tonight, mutual trust and openness between the Vajra master and student. I wonder, you talk in the book Mudra in a poem, do not trust, do not trust. And I wonder if this notion changes as your stage changes along the line of your relationship with the Vajra master.
I think it's saying the same thing, actually. That because you do not trust, you have an experience of not trusting at all. And therefore there's some kind of understanding takes place because your distrustfulness, which has become very real, very personal. I think it's saying the same thing.
Thank you.
Maybe we should close on whatever.